to join us in this discussion as we reflect on Zimbabwe's SADC Chairmanship. What did we achieve? And of course, what did we gain as well as a country? And what are we looking forward to now after this experience as well? So I'm sending you guys the mic requests while we wait for others to join in. But from August 2024 to July 2025, Zimbabwe held the rotating SADC Chairmanship, officially assuming the role at the 44th Ordinary Summit in Harare on the 17th of August 2024, under the theme promoting innovation to unlock opportunities for sustainable economic growth and development towards an industrialized SADC. As Chairpresident Mnangagwa and Zimbabwean authorities spearheaded major engagements like the 7th SADC Industrialization Week, urging member states to embrace technology, agribusiness, value chains, and low-carbon energy to drive regional integration and resilience. And there is more. But I see Richard is here. Richard, good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning, and thanks for making it happen. Hello, good morning.
Unfortunately, I can't hear you there, Richard. Maybe let me try Tendai. Good morning, Tendai. Welcome to the show.
Can you scan that?
Good morning.
Send to...
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I can actually hear Tendai, but I couldn't hear Richard speaking there. But I would like him to start off with his reflections. Richard, since you have another engagement, I'll just ask you to come in and give us your presentation, so that we don't get to go through the questions. But of course, there were themes really. We spoke about industrialization, agribusiness, technology, value chains, low carbon energy, and of course Zimbabwe assumed a chairmanship when there was also a drought. There were also elections in several countries, and of course what is happening as well in the DRC there. Maybe if you can reflect on that as well, and Zimbabwe's leadership around all these situations. Over to you, Richard, and I hope I'm going to be able to hear you doing your presentation there.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope I'm audible now. Yeah, I'm saying I hope I'm audible now.
Yeah, unfortunately, I still can't hear Richard. Tendai, can you hear Richard speaking?
Yes, I can.
Okay, and I hope other guests can hear him. Okay, I'm seeing people raising hands there. Okay, Richard, please do go ahead this morning.
Audible? Oh, okay. Yeah, so the starting point is that Zimbabwe's chairmanship was a reflection of the country's bona fide to SADC, not only as an ordinary member state, but as one of the founding member states of the SADC regional bloc. So, as is per the tradition of all regional blocs, Zimbabwe's chairmanship was on a rotational basis as guided by the protocol of that institution. And what this also symbolized was that it confirmed Zimbabwe's bona fide membership to that institution, and that Zimbabwe is heavily ideologically invested in the principles of SADC. And how was that symbolized? We saw the rapid infrastructure development, which was targeting, the hosting of the summit that is in the areas of hospitality, that is in the areas of conferencing, that is in the areas of roads and infrastructure. And across social media, also, there was a sentiment that, well, this is government's PR to ensure that, the neighbors in the region have this elusive picture of Zimbabwe's. Zimbabwe's, image. But what that did was it expressed the ideological investment that Zimbabwe has in this institution. I've been privy to going to certain summits that are hosted by other countries in terms of the smooth sailing process of how we hosted the summit, the high class infrastructure development that we had really has positioned Zimbabwe as a present and as a future citadel of African diplomacy, because now we've demonstrated our capacity to be able to host many heads of state. And what that does in terms of geopolitical positioning, it means that Zimbabwe then is began to assume its place as a site of African Renaissance. Zimbabwe has begun to reassert its place as a think tank for the decolonial agenda of the region and that of the African continent. But as a last summation of my submission, one very important issue that emerged from our hosting of the SADC chairmanship was that in the context of the perennial conflict in the DRC, we were able to host SADC heads of state, culminating in the historical, in the novel, and the first ever resolution for two economic regional groupings to sit together and discuss the issue at Congos in DRC. So we now have a situation whereby the East Regional Bloc is partnering with SADC to actually deal with the issues in the Eastern Bloc. So for me, that is historic, and it shows the diplomatic genius of Zimbabwe as the citadel of African Renaissance, as the citadel of African unity consolidation under President Emerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa and ZANU-PF.
Not I think Richard has finished his presentation.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Tendai. So yeah, I'm still trying to reconnect, but Tendai, please do go ahead with your reflections as well, and maybe comment on the issues that Richard touched on.
To what the infrastructure development that Richard mentioned, that we saw the massive infrastructure development just before the SADC summit. That again is very shameful. Why do I say so? Why do we need to resurface our roads just before hosting a SADC summit or hosting regional leaders. Why is this not something that is consistent, that our roads are in good shape, our hotels are in good shape, our conference facilities are perpetually in good shape? So the very fact that we had to run around as a country just before visitors came to resurface our roads, most of which are already potholed. Go today, travel along Julius Nyerere, which was closed last year for resurfacing. Already there are potholes there. So all this running around that we saw last year was a sign that Zimbabwe is on the brink of becoming a failed state. We have roads that are potholed in the city center, let alone in other parts of the country. We have infrastructure that is falling apart. So for a country to now start running around just because they want to paint this facade that we are a progressive country, we are a developed country, is rather unfortunate. And again, we saw the arrests of over 100 opposition activists just before the SADC summit in Harare. That in itself was telling that we have a government that is panicking. They consider this SADC summit to be their only success in decades. This is a country that has been messing up time and time and time again. They have nothing to show in terms of success. So this SADC summit was one thing that they could have, that they would show the world that no, Zimbabwe is not all failure. We've managed to do this SADC summit. We've managed to successfully host it. So they were in panic mode to protect this SADC summit so that nothing at all will come in the way of it being portrayed as a success. So you'll find that instead of respecting the values of SADC, such as democracy, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, the Zimbabwe government went the opposite direction by cracking down on dissent. Even people who were not actually planning anything tangible against it, they have not proven that any of those people that were arrested before the SADC summit were actually planning anything during the SADC summit. So it was just a panicked response. That in itself tells a lot about the nature of the SADC chairmanship we were going to witness after that. So look at what happened in Mozambique. That is very telling. Now Zimbabwe is a SADC chair. What it's supposed to be pushing the ideals and the principles of SADC, free and fair elections, the respect of human rights, democracy, as I've mentioned before. But here is Zimbabwe, SADC chair, being fingered in sending Zimbabweans to be registered for Mozambique elections and to participate in another country's elections. We saw that similar accusations in Namibian elections. So already we saw that the Zimbabwe SADC chairmanship was tainted from day one, from the get-go. Instead of fostering democracy, the rule of law, and free and fair elections, we saw Zimbabwe being fingered in actually violating other countries' democratic processes, violating other countries' electoral processes. We can come to even the issue of the DRC. Let's be honest. Yes, as much as Zimbabwe, a SADC chair, can be, credited with pushing for this summit between the East African community and SADC, but nothing much came out of it. Whatever agreement was reached between Rwanda, who were accused of sponsoring the M23 rebels, and the DRC, was the result of Donald Trump, twisting their arms and securing all these mineral concessions and so forth, and another extension of plundering Africa's resources. And that's what led to what we now believe to be a peace deal. So we really cannot put much to Zimbabwe's chairmanship of SADC. We can even look at the current tariffs being imposed by the US. Just recently, Trump imposed a 30% tariff increment, if I'm not mistaken. Where is Zimbabwe a SADC chair? It's silent. Actually, soon after Donald Trump came in at the beginning of this year and began this trade war, we have not seen Zimbabwe step up as SADC chair. We have not seen Zimbabwe even calling for a meeting of SADC countries and saying, how do we respond as a collective to these tariffs that are being imposed by the US? If anything, we have seen Zimbabwe taking its own isolated position by completely removing tariffs on US products coming into Zimbabwe. A decision that is not only a threat on Zimbabwean industries, but also a threat on SADC itself. So we are seeing this uh, one-man show being exhibited in SADC, where we have the SADC chair, going all on his own, making his own decisions instead of the collective and saying, how do we as SADC protect each other from these US tariffs? So this is something that we would have expected to see from a responsible SADC chair to have a collective response to these trade tariffs being imposed by the US. So I don't know if I can stop now so that I can respond to your questions, Nontlatla, but in a nutshell, that's what I can say.
Well,
thank you
so much. Thank you so much, Tendai. Guys, if you are just joining us today, we are in conversation with Richard Mahomva, the Director of International Communication Services for the Government of Zimbabwe. He's also a Pan-Africanist and a researcher. Our other guest is Tendai Ruben Bofana, a writer and a social justice advocate. Both our guests are giving a reflection on Zimbabwe's tenure as SADC chair. And you've heard from Richard, we've heard from Tendai as well, speaking on issues of governance, human rights, and peacekeeping as well. And I'd like to bring in Richard as well, maybe to also respond to some of the issues that Tendai has also raised in terms of governance. I know we also saw reports about the funding, where the funds of the infrastructural development came from, BEAM, and how this is now affecting the country as well. How do we then come back looking at that as well? Diversion of public welfare funds. Over to you there, Richard.
Oh, thank you very much for allowing me to dig in. But unfortunately, I'll be digging in for the last time because I have an engagement somewhere. So I think I listened to Comrade Mbofana's very passionate submission. Passionate in the sense that it was a submission that is highly polemic, a submission that was expressing what I would want to refer to as some patriotic anger. An anger which I think is misplaced and is predicated on basic foreign policy illiteracy. So, as a starting point, when a country is appointed to take up a post as this post that Zimbabwe assumed, it is a very obvious fact that that role is rotational. So for us to say it is only ceremonial, I think it is not factually and administratively true, because what happens is that is a rotational task that actually also confirms the collective legitimacy that is conferred upon a state by fellow member states. It shows that Zimbabwe is a bona fide member of that SADC institutions. It pays subscriptions. It conforms to the rules of SADC. Therefore, the social media allegations that arise linked to a party in government which is a member state of a multilateral organization, those things then don't suffice. Yes, there could be allegations, true or false, but allegations are allegations. Like my brother rightly said it, it's allegations which cannot be proved beyond reasonable doubt, but can only be proved on the basis of tweets by people that are perennially opposed to the government. So, you can have rumors that Zimbabwe assisted in rigging the Mozambican. That is not on the agenda of the diplomatic and administrative processes of SADC when it convenes its summit. So people can say all these things, but then it also shows you that the originators of that propaganda are illiterate in terms of how foreign policy issues function. And it's very sad that these rumors are mostly generated by actors from a potential government in waiting. So it shows you the extent to which we have got so much, a misguided activist mistruths that are mostly triggering sometimes, anger from my good brother, as you noted from his submission. So it is misplaced anger. So the issue at the end, it is also not true to say that Zimbabwe was not radically ideologically invested. I'll give you an example. Number one, Zimbabwe of SADC, it initiated the architecture of SADC. Number two, if you compare the infrastructure development that was put by South Africans when they hosted the World Cup in South Africa, it clearly shows you that when international platforms are hosted by a country, it's an opportunity for those countries to actually build their reputation. My good brother Tendai Mbofana, I'm sure I was already at high school or at primary school, and I was not born at the time when Zimbabwe hosted the non-aligned movement conference. There was massive infrastructure development courtesy of that. So you should come to this platform and pretend that this is something new. I was in Dubai for I think the previous edition of COP. This is what countries do when they are hosting summits. You could see that the roads are freshly tarred. I was in Russia for the Russia Africa Summit in 2023. You could see that even the buildings there were smelling, fresh paint. You see, so it's not an anomaly, regardless of how we may dislike the government in power. It's not an anomaly for countries to do facelifting of their conference centers. It's not an anomaly for countries to actually, finance the renovations of their hotels, because our summits are gone, then it automatically means that you have got world-class hotels, you have got world-class roads, you have got world-class conferences that also facilitate the, increased, capital flow into a state. So it is political administrative ignorance for anyone to see the renovation infrastructure as a part of ZANU-PF posturing to the international community. Let's look at this public infrastructure as assets that also enhance our dignity out there, having a nice airport, having these very, innovative mechanisms of even hosting international conferences. It's good for our country. Let's not only look at it as posturing, as political posturing. We need to be mature beyond these narrow edifices of irrational social media driven polemic sentiments in a way. Mm.
Well, thank you, Richard, for responding to that. And allow me to bring in new speakers to also contribute to today's discussion. Good morning, Daraji. Welcome to the show. Please be brief so that we give others a chance as well.
Oh, thank you very much, Nontransha. Thank you very much, Site. I appreciate this space, and I also appreciate the topics that are very, very prominent. Thank you so much, speakers. And I know the first speaker was trying to defend the undefensible, and then the two subsequent speakers were telling the truth. I respect everyone for their opinion, and but what we have seen is a simple rotation. There's no the criteria is that you have to and you have to. But what matters is what the Zimbabwean chairmanship should have learned and probably followed that line. They seem to have learned nothing at all. And it was also preceded by very wrong prioritization of things. During this period, we saw the government missed quite a number of targets. The previous speaker was talking of his experience where he went to Russia, he has attended so many summits, wonderful. And he has seen what we never saw in Zimbabwe. The villas are not yet complete. If they are complete now, they are no longer going to save SADC, and it's a fact. And to me, that was a misdirection of resources. Misdirection in that we could have helped the existing accommodation to upgrade, like the previous speaker was saying, upgrading of buildings in Russia when they were having this Africa summit. We failed and we put money to waste and we never recovered anything. That is a hole in our budget created. And this is money that could have done 5, 10, 20, 15 cancer machines, and these would have been distributed throughout Zimbabwe. Wrong priority. The roads, if you look at the traffic, that's outside Lomagundi Road, probably going to Parliament. Those are not used as much as roads around the country. During the period we've seen, because funds were taken from where they were supposed to be, we've seen a lot of an increase in accidents with the latest Chitungwiza Road accident, two of them actually. The Bedbridge Road has recorded an upsurge in accidents that shows the depletion or the deterioration of our infrastructure. We also have seen Trabablas or Trababalas or whatever, I don't know how you pronounce it, being completed way after the scheduled time. And then what happened was brazen corruption, which is beyond description. But maybe briefly for those that might wonder where this corruption was. And this money should have been channeled to other needy roads. We see the Nkai Road that has not been finished. We've seen also the Victoria Falls Road that has just been started. Maybe that money should have been directed to such immediate or urgent requirements. It is urgent that we have the Victoria Falls Road done. It is urgent that we have the Nkai Road done, the Cholosho Road. I'm just naming some roads that are in really bad state, but there are those that are in baddest state that I cannot describe around Mashonaland. But I'm saying some that are very prominent, and there was a misdirection of resources. Tribablas ended up showing 114 million. Parliament agreed to 88 million. Parliament sat and agreed to 88 million. So we have seen an upsurge in corruption. Instead, tourist Ngube went on to dip his hands into special drawing rights, which were allocated to Zimbabwe by IMF in 2021. Instead of you, in accounting, simple accounting, where you pay a deposit, you reduce what you owe. We owed a Grace Company, construction company, 88 million. We paid 26 million. In Mutulisi's accounts, that deposit was then added to the global figure of 88 to come up to 11. And Mutulisi argues that we are also seeing during the chairship, Minister of Finances in Zimbabwe failing to adhere to proper constitution, our own constitution. Parliamentarians then had to approve a loan created by Mtulis with the IMF without consent from the people. During the time of SADC chairship, Zimbabwe should learn how to democratically democratize this country, because we've seen some handover, takeover of power happening. I'm not sure now the dates, but a few countries, one was Namibia, one was Botswana, and there are more elections coming, and we do not think that ZANU-PF has learned anything. We are struggling with Guy Shangani. Sorry, we're struggling with Gwai Shangani Dam. Infrastructures everywhere around SADC, where the Zimbabwean president was so privileged to be chair rotationally, has improved. We've seen him taking on the industrialization. There's no industrialization in Zimbabwe. If there's any development in technology, technology has been taken. Strive came up with a hub in West Africa instead of bringing it to Zimbabwe or to SADC. He never fought for that, and that would have actually changed technology in Africa. I rest here and give other chances. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Daraji, for giving us your reflections and speaking on what you think Zimbabwe should have learned during its term as SADC as chair. Well, we'll move on to another speaker there. Good morning, Tsepang. Please be brief so that we give others a chance to speak as well.
Good morning, Nonsansa. Good morning to the rest of the listeners. Whenever I see the issue around SADC chairmanship, I just think of the statement which says, Kanauchifamba, Zwakutori SADC chair. So, yeah, that tends to be very interesting. Anyway, yeah, there's quite a lot really around this issue. Where do I start from, Nonsansa? Let's look at the positivities first. I would want to concur with I think he has left Richie, who was saying, I think the chairmanship really did give us a good spotlight in one way or the other, in terms of when you look at issues of tourism, and whenever chairmanship has been assumed by a particular country, there's so much focus on that country, so that boosts tourism, number one. Number two, it sort of enhances the image of the country in one way or the other. You realize that there were a series of engagements that were held here, especially between June and July. One of the discussions was to develop a model law on artificial intelligence, which was quite interesting, having such issues being discussed here. One of the fundamental issues as well is that for the first time we had a declaration. I don't know whether they'll call it the Zimbabwe Declaration, where there was an open, a unanimous call within SADC member states to take decisive steps to deal with issues of merciless killings of individuals with albinism. But that was a step in the right direction. And of course, we saw massive infrastructural development, which is also good in terms of sprucing up the image of the country. But of course, I have to agree with even the previous speaker who says the way things were done was very improper. You know, early this year, if I'm not mistaken, in January, we had a whole minister opening up to say the reason why we are lagging behind when it comes to basic education assistance module funding is because the funds were taken, diverted towards um, infrastructural development. So that's why we realized that payment of bean funds is delayed. And that's a cause for concern. Again, when you look at infrastructural development, Nonhlanhla, resources are not equitably distributed. What was the justification of focusing on uh, 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 constructing a whole new road that goes to Mount Hampton, neglecting Bulawayo Victoria Falls Road, where you find one of the seven wonders of the world, and where tourism is a major contributor when it comes to the economy emanates from. But you realize that there was an aspect of neglecting that. And of course, in as much as road construction was necessary and ideal, but there was no due diligence done. You remember the issue of pine trees that started to wither within a week or two after the whole chairmanship ceremony had been done. You sit back and say, who was given the tender? Was there due diligence there? Money was paid towards planting of those pine trees, but we all know what happened. You go back and say we have other priority areas like the healthcare. You understand? What was the justification of building diplomatic villas vis-a-vis what do you call it, refurbishing maybe one of the hospitals? It only took so much noise recently for that to happen. I'm not sure whether it's still happening, but the last time I checked, there were refurbishment, renovations rather, that were being done at Pararenyatwa. And you sit back and say, had a significant number of people fallen sick, was there adequate infrastructure to be able to cater for their immediate needs if they had fallen sick while in Zimbabwe attending the actual ceremony or attending?
Yeah, we seem to have lost at the bang this morning as he was giving his reflections on Zimbabwe SADC chairmanship. He spoke of the positives and also the negatives from his view. What do you think, guys? What are your reflections on Zimbabwe SADC chairmanship? Please do request the mic and share your reflections. Today, our guest, Tendai Ruben Bofana, who is a writer and a social justice advocate. And the other guest is Richard Rinyararo Mahomva, who is the Director of International Communication Services for the government of Zimbabwe. He went offline a bit, but I'm sure he'll be coming back because he's in a meeting. But I'm sure as the discussion goes on, I hope he'll be coming back to engage us and to continue his presentations this morning. For now, let's hear from Dobbs. Good morning, Dobbs.
Yeah, morning. Yeah, we have we have seen a lot and learned nothing from the SADC chairmanship because there's nothing
Unfortunately, I can't
to.
hear you there, Dobbs. Tendai, can you hear Dobbs speaking?
Hello,
Yes, I can.
what about now? Can you hear me now?
Okay, well, please do go ahead, Dobbs, and please be brief so that we take other speakers as well.
Yeah, many thanks. We have learned a lot, but take nothing from the SADC chairmanship. As people said, it's just something ceremonial. I need to agree with them because the organization itself is no longer fit for any purpose. It's no longer, it's only serving the elite who are benefit. I don't think there's anything where citizens are benefiting from just belonging to that group of SADC. But as a nation, our leadership failed a lot. They should have taken that platform to demonstrate, to say they can be integrated in the regional community and promote regional integration. Recently, we have seen even countries such as Botswana, Zambia, and Namibia just allowing their citizens to move across each other's border with IDs. Yet that region is chaired by Zimbabwe, and the Zimbabweans are excluded. We have seen even Zimbabweans being chased away from hospitals in South Africa. So we seen, I think maybe this organization itself is just serving no particular purpose. And we failed to rejoin the Commonwealth because we demonstrated that we are just useless when we just come and do our individual thing. Like what he rightfully said by another speaker to say, even when we talk about tariffs, it is the citizens who are made to suffer to just please other nations. Like in the case of USA, where there is zero tariff, while we are supposed to pay up to 35%. So it's quite disturbing. And I don't see any benefit of being a chair, of us being a chairperson of an organization, while without using that position to make any influence, or that position to demonstrate, to say we can lead and we can associate with other nations. And we should have used that position to be admitted into the Commonwealth. For the sake of time, let me just end up here. I receive my mic. Thanks a lot, everybody. Tendai or Padare or Crusen. I think the host is not hearing
Well,
me.
Jobs, I see you are done there. Thank you so much for your submissions this morning, reflecting on Zimbabwe's SADC chairmanship. I see Padare is here as well. We'll take Padare and then we go back to Tendai to also give us some remarks on the issues that have been raised. Good morning, Padare. Welcome to This Morning on Asake.
Good morning, madam. Many thanks. And we thank you again for becoming a progressive voice where people can actually criticize and build and shape their country and also make contributions that are progressive for our nation. It's very commendable. As for me, besides the unconscious bias, besides the confirmation bias that I'm hearing, I think if we had to have this conversation soon after our election, we would be hearing a different thought. What I'm hearing here is a people who are acknowledging that there is development going on in our country, but it is going to the wrong places. It's not going to the places that they are thinking it should be going. And the fact that people are actually acknowledging the tick box that something is happening, and it's a beautiful thing. It might not be happening where you are saying this is why I want it to be, or the resources have gone somewhere where they're not supposed to go. But we are hearing one voice of, okay, we are doing something. The country is doing something, but they should have done Victoria Falls Road, for instance, or they should have done this road, but they went and did that road, or they went and built this thing. It's a better position than we were 6, 7 years ago. And that's a good thing. That means something good is happening besides the criticism that there is. SADC, when it came, how did it come? It came at a difficult time after an election in Zimbabwe, which was propaganded by the opposition that, in the mission statement of SADC and what SADC stood for. So there was a narration of what SADC really stood for and what it meant. And that narrative, that wrong narrative, came from the alternative people that we think are an alternative government was supposed to be fact checking and actually ushering the country in the right direction. They misguided the thoughts of many. Spaces were run here, information dissemination, contaminated information hitting and getting to the spaces where it was not supposed to. So our people were plastered with the concept of a SADC which does not exist, the powers of SADC which does not exist. However, as we saw evolving on and taking that role of chairmanship, we discovered that all what the opposition had brought to our plate was actually a false narrative and false hope. So that's another a position where we understood when we took it, it was an interesting time, not just because Zimbabwe was going through an election time and gone through an election time, but also there was conflict in Mozambique. We took that time and we pushed. Right now, there's nothing much that is coming from that area because even our forces were involved silently, in the elimination of the enemy that was coming and crushing into the Mozambican space. So again, that's a credit to the SADC chairmanship. Again, we look at the DRC, the involvement of the historical union of the of SADC in the eastern region in bringing a conference resolution in that region. So that's what it's about. This mission was to do about regional integration. If we're talking about regional integration beyond security, because security it has to be the paramount position where we need to be. We tick that box. Feeding our nation. We became an exemplary country in actually providing for our people, which means whoever is in the SADC region also benefit if Zimbabwe is producing more. So it means food sustainability and poverty eradication in terms of hunger. We have actually ticked the box as an exemplary country and influence within the SADC region. Again, that's a tick in the box for our people, which was led by the what I call him a transformational leader, Dr. Mnangagwa. So we are seeing a region which is stabilizing in many regards. We had elections in South Africa. There's also elections in other places. So we see the peace that has actually come within this region. So we have to think that at the point where we are. Again, it's rotational. This SADC chairmanship has always been rotational. It is going to Madagascar. We are going to be
Padare, I hope you are lending so that we give others a chance as well.
now. So it's a rotational way it is. We are going to go to number 2 as it stands at the moment. Our youth also in leadership in the youth council within SADC itself, which means there's a lot of development, there's a lot of exchange within this this body, and empowering our youth in leadership and so forth. So there's a lot of positiveness that has come through this SADC mission. The infrastructure that comes in, it's natural for infrastructure to come in with such big events, and it's a good timing for any nation to be at that position because resources can be poured into the places where we can't, and some people can bring in money from the region, from everywhere else, because it's an exciting time for a nation to build. Our tourism boost, there was so much that was done, which still stands as a stencil within our own country that the SADC chairmanship, with although it is just a few years, but there was much, much, much that Zimbabwe benefited from it. And most of all, again, it sanitized our politics because SADC was never come to get a rerun of our elections. Many thanks.
Padare? Oh, thank you so much for your submissions at this morning. Reflecting on Zimbabwe's SADC chairmanship, I'll come back to Tendai there to also maybe respond to some of the issues that have been raised. And one of the things that we are worried about, that we look forward to, is economic growth and economic gains. And I'd like to ask Tendai, after you respond to the issues that have been raised, in your view, did the chairmanship entrench economic gains not only for Zimbabwe but also for the region?
Thank you so much, Nhlanhla, for that very good question. In fact, I can even start with that. You remember when we started, we said that when Zimbabwe took over the SADC chairmanship, it was under the theme that it was for promoting innovation, to unlock opportunities for sustainable economic development. And that goes very well with the question that you've asked. Has Zimbabwe or SADC in general developed, innovation? Has it promoted innovation? Has it unlocked opportunities for sustainable economic growth in the past year? The answer to that is no. I don't think any of the speakers, especially those that were trying to paint this rosy picture of Zimbabwe's chairmanship of SADC, can point to any economic development that took place that can be attributed to SADC as a region. I'm not talking about individual countries promoting innovation or unlocking opportunities for sustainable economic growth in their own countries, but as a SADC, as a region. How, as in the past year, for instance, how have we promoted intra-regional trade, for instance? There's nothing to talk about. I remember the previous speaker mentioned something to the effect that Zimbabwe should be proud that we managed to feed our own people, and that we should serve as some sort of a role model. To be honest, who has been feeding the people of Zimbabwe, especially after the El Nino drought? The president declared a state of national disaster or something like that, and we pleaded. We went onto the international market with the begging bowl in hand, begging for financial assistance. So you find that those who are feeding the people of Zimbabwe today, that we can say no one is died directly from hunger, these are the Western countries that they accuse of imposing sanctions on the country. So we never fed our people. The only bumper anything that we talk about in Zimbabwe is wheat. We have not been fed with wheat. We are being fed with minimum and other basics. And they are not coming from the government of Zimbabwe or from our natural resources. They are coming from outside. So we can see that as far as the economy is concerned, Zimbabwe's economy over the past year has been stagnant. The Zim dollar has been dysfunctional. The Zimbabwe gold, the ZiG, has been stagnant. We might try to portray it as being stable. But what stability means is that there's no movement. That's what stable means, is that it's not improving, neither is it depreciating. It's just hovering in one place. But where is that place? Can anyone access the ZiG? Can anyone actually go to an ATM and access the ZiG? Can this ZiG be traded on the international market? No. So can we really say that our economy is functional? We are still really heavily dependent on the US dollar. Our economy is still hugely informal. We're still talking about 90% unemployment. Our hospitals are still falling apart, say for one or two renovations that have been mentioned that are taking place at Salim Mugabe. But quite honestly, our country's health sector is in intensive care. So what benefit has really accrued our industries? Which industries have come up over the past year in Zimbabwe that we can attribute to our SADC chairmanship and say, look at these industrial development that is taking place. Look at this beneficiation that is taking place. In fact, we are seeing our minerals, especially lithium ore, being looted daily by Chinese companies, being exported and taken to China. So without any beneficiation and no benefit to the country whatsoever. So you'll find that our country has not benefited. We talk about, I mentioned the tariffs by the United States, 35% tariffs. And what does Zimbabwe do? How do we respond? By totally removing tariffs on US goods coming into the country. How is that benefiting Zimbabwe? Yes, we can have the country flooded with US products, but what does that do to our own industries? What does that do to our own manufacturers? So you find that over the past year, there is really no positive development to talk about. We mentioned the political issues that have been happening in the region. In Mozambique, for instance. Yes, Padare has mentioned Zimbabwe's supposed, there is no evidence to support that supposed involvement in fighting the terrorists in regions in Mozambique. But we know that Rwanda did most of that fighting. But the elections were disputed last year. There was widespread violence. We mentioned that Zimbabweans were interviewed. They were there in front of the camera. Mashingo Mira carried that story. They had been registered to participate in elections in Mozambique. But after the post-election chaos, how did Zimbabwe as SADC chair respond to it? In no way. We had two, if I'm not mistaken, extraordinary meetings called by Zimbabwe. They focused on the conflict in the DRC. Only a paragraph or so in the communique in reference to the crisis in Mozambique. Zimbabwe did nothing, absolutely nothing. So the relative peace that we are finding in Mozambique today between the two political parties that were involved in these elections is not because of Zimbabwe or the Zimbabwe's chairmanship of SADC. It was a result of the internal processes in Mozambique. So you find that we can even talk about the infrastructure. We go back to the infrastructure. Yes, Richard did mention that he's been to Russia and so forth and so forth. He even mentioned the non-aligned movement and so forth, meeting that was held here in Zimbabwe. Yes, no one can deny that if there is a major event taking place in a particular country, they try by all means to spruce up. The operative word here is to spruce up the infrastructure. Even if you have visitors in your own home, no more cleaner, but not that the people the children in that family were not being fed. They were starving before. Just because now they are visitors, you buy them food. That is exactly what we saw in Zimbabwe last year. This was not sprucing up. Our roads were they were in a deplorable, and they are still in a deplorable state. Only 3 or 4 roads that the government knew will be used by the heads of state were the ones that were resurfaced. But as I mentioned, go to Samora, to Julius Nyerere today, they are now potholes here and there. So what we saw in Zimbabwe is very shameful in that we are allowing our infrastructure to crumble to the point that they are dysfunctional. And only when you hear that there are certain heads of states who are coming to visit, you only repair those few roads so that the heads of state will just travel on these roads and say, Zimbabwe is doing well. Look at their roads, look at their hotels and this infrastructure. And yet the rest of Zimbabwe is in shambles. The people are suffering, So these are issues that we need to interrogate. If Zimbabwe is to learn anything from this SADC summit, is that you cannot pretend out of your way to prosperity. We need genuine prosperity. We know that this is a rotational chairmanship, so it means after a few years, it will be coming back to Zimbabwe. So the government now has to make sure that everything is in good shape from today. The hospitals in Berengwa, in Binga, throughout the country, the roads, whether it's in Kwekwe, in Redcliffe, in Rusape, let's have the roads in good shape. Let's have our our hospitals in good shape. Let's not wait for a few months before the next SADC summit to run around and use money that is supposed to be paying for school fees for our children to pave roads. Let's see genuine development in this country so that when the next SADC summit comes to this country, all we will need to do is spruce up something that is already in good shape. But we just put the touches here, touches there, but already things will be functional. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Tendai, for responding to that question. Kurisi, I know you're in South Africa. What did SADC chairman's, what did Zimbabwe SADC chairmanship look like for you?
Hey, yeah, good morning, fellow Africans. You know, I think we must start here. The organization
Tendai, can you hear Kurisi speaking? Can you hear Kurisi speaking?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Second, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. No. I was saying, I think we need to start by first scrutinizing what SADC is meant to achieve, and if it's achieving that. And I don't think SADC is achieving anything. We are we are slowly becoming politically unstable as a region because governments in our respective countries are not doing what is right to their citizens first, and secondly, the SADC is just quiet. And the thing with the leadership of SADC from Zimbabwe, it came at a very crucial stage where in Zimbabwe itself, there is political instability and the oppositions are harassed and everything. There seemed to be no respect to human rights, basically, in Zimbabwe by the ruling party. And that is, and giving the chairmanship to those people, it also bothered on morality. Do we have moral standing to can even say the leadership of ZANU-PF is the chairperson of SADC in as they are in government in Zimbabwe? It brought us on that question, and it failed the moral question on that ground. And secondly, you cannot come on a public space and say we built hotels, we benefited from hotels and roads and this and airports, whereas the very same citizens of that very country can't afford to go into that hotels. If a citizen can't book into a hotel, why are you priding yourself with building a hotel for a diplomat? It doesn't make sense. I don't know that. I think maybe we need to be honest, and we must not shy away from calling people cheerleaders. If you're going to tell the country that is so poor that they have built a hotels that are world class, they have built an airport that is world class, what does an ordinary Zimbabwean citizen do with that? I mean, we know the state of health in Zimbabwe, and the problem. See, here's the thing: the very same state of health in Zimbabwe is going to trickle down to other countries, because where there is overpopulation, where there is too much demand than supply, things falls apart. And if you look at South Africa's state of health now, it's at the brink of collapse because it's taking more than it can afford. And it's taking more than it can afford because some people from other countries where there's no basic health care, they come here and they want to benefit from that. And that goes down to what? To the failure to the collapse of the what is only reliable health service. And when those things happen, people start calling other people names and all those things. But SADC is keeping quiet. You know, instead of SADC saying, no, guys, let's sit down and let's discuss the state of our region, they just give a leadership to someone else, and that person doesn't do anything. And for heaven's sake, we had an instability in Mozambique, a very serious instability. You know, any political instability that is not taken care of is a problem. And we saw it's self-dying because no one from externally made an impactful intervention. The SADC was just not there. They were just, and another thing is because the leadership of these countries are former liberation movements. They held a summit here in Johannesburg sometime not long ago, I'm thinking 2 weeks back, and they were talking about defending the gains of liberation movement. And I don't understand what that means, because there is no gain on the ground. The gain is only with them and the benefits that they get from leading the state and the loot that they are doing, nothing else. So the impact, I didn't feel any impact personally. I don't even see the impact of SADC in anything because they're not willing to hold each other accountable. The government of Zimbabwe under ZANU-PF should be held accountable from a long time ago to say you cannot continue on this road. If people are complaining of vote rigging, that is a serious issue that you need to deal with. And there should have been diplomatic sanctions. authorized by SADC for certain leaders in our region who are not doing right. No one is doing anything. Right now, for another example, Swaziland. Swaziland is importing dangerous criminals from United States of America. And no one in SADC is saying, oh, wait, guys, you cannot bring people who their very own countries are rejecting into this region, because those people are going a threat to our region. We don't know why, even if US can't hold you, if the US feel like you are a threat to them, what about SADC? You see,
Kurisi,
those
I
are
hope you
things
are
that
wrapping
SADC
up.
are quite about them. Say again. No, that was my submission, to say we have a passive leadership that is not doing anything, that is not benefiting our citizens, that is not helping to improve the livelihoods of our region, of our citizens, of our countries, nothing at all. And we should not shy away from calling people who they are. And the cheerleaders of ZANU-PF must be called to order. We must call them out, because they come here and they talk things as if it's all rosy in Zimbabwe, which is not. And if it was all rosy, we wouldn't be having too many people leaving Zimbabwe. There are more people outside Zimbabwe. There are more Zimbabweans outside Zimbabwe than in Zimbabwe. And we have people from ZANU-PF who come here and talk as if everything is good, calling people doctors. Doctor of what? Mnangagwa must be called out, and ZANU-PF must be called out, because there are rogue elements in our region. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Kurisi, for your submissions this morning, reflecting on Zimbabwe's SADC chairmanship. And I hope you touched on Dudula, as well as xenophobia and all that is happening in South Africa. For now, let's hear from Tamsanga, and then we go to Taxi Driver, and then Tendai wraps up the show. Good morning, Tamsanga. Welcome to This Morning on Asake.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you very much, Nkosazana and your colleagues. I think you guys are doing an amazing job. I want to start my submission by saying, my short submission by saying, the SADC chairmanship of Zimbabwe was both a success and a missed opportunity. And I would say I would zero in on the missed opportunity bit, because I think it is better to learn lessons and also to trigger the debate of what we do next time we get chairmanship. But before I do that, I know you couldn't hear Kurisi, my brother, who did a very passionate submission, which I appreciate. But I just wanted to find out from him when last he was in Zimbabwe.
Okay, Kurisi, maybe you can respond to that. But I think Kurisi is actually South African. But I'll let him respond.
I know. He made a submission, but I just wanted to know when he was last in Zimbabwe.
Going to Zimbabwe is neither here nor there, because if I go to Zimbabwe, I check in a hotel, I check in a resort, and then I come back. It has nothing. I won't see the actual
I
life
agree
of
with your submission, but I just wanted to know when you were last in Zimbabwe. That's all.
last year.
I'm not taking
Last year.
issue with your submission. No.
Last year.
Last year. Okay, that's fine. Okay, that's okay. He's a host. I mean, a guest, and we should, part of the SADC chairmanship, we should be nice to everyone, and we should listen to everyone. Maku, he had said that there are more Zimbabweans outside Zimbabwe than in Zimbabwe, but I'm not going to argue or take issue with that. That's his view. Okay, so where I say SADC chairmanship was a success, is taking from what Mahomva was saying. There's most of the things that are done on this are diplomatic, and diplomacy by its nature is very quiet. So you would have seen Vice President Chiwenga, General Chiwenga, going to Zambia when there were issues between the administration in Zambia and the family of the late former President Edgar Lungu. There was a lot of work that was being done behind the scenes. And when our vice president went there, it was part of that work. Now, when that kind of work is being done, because you are holding the chair of SADC, fostering relations, political dialogue amongst nations. It's a balancing act. You are not their boss. You are not interfering in the internal political issues of countries, but you are safeguarding the interest and the mandate of SADC. It's not as straightforward as that. You don't go in and tell people what to do, but you go in and try to be the go-between. You know, the sort of role that President Zuma was playing in 2009, and you know, with former Minister Zulu, Lindiwe, and all that. So that is the role that SADC plays. You don't go in and tell people what to do, but you go in and try to mediate. So there's a lot of mediation. The same with Mozambique. There are a lot of people who think, oh, something happened in Mozambique, people died, and then suddenly it all went quiet. No. There was a lot of work that was being done from the chair of SADC, but all that work is quiet because you are mediating quietly. If you put a loudspeaker to those very sensitive processes, it won't work. So for me, there are other things that are diplomatic as well, where you say, oh, Zambia and Namibia and Botswana are now doing this. So what happens is part of the role of SADC is to make sure that the relations within nations become better, the cooperation becomes better for social and economic purposes. So if 2 or 3 of the 14 or 15 or 16 children in a family end up being a success story as a pilot to see how that would work. Because when you do these things, you don't just start by globalizing them within the region. You can start and say, okay, let's see how Zambia and Botswana and Zambia and Namibia would work. Can they use IDs? How is that process going to be monitored? If there are criminals that move from one end to the other, will they exploit that? How do you make sure that that doesn't happen? Because you are also being monitored by the international bodies or conventions that want to make sure that there is no movement of illegal goods, drugs, people, and stuff like that, that people can come into one country and end up hiding in another. There are so many things that are involved in that. So you want to run a pilot that is manageable and then learn lessons. And then once you think, this is something that we can do, then you can have something like the Schengen visa in the in Europe, where people can go in Italy and end up in, I don't know, Slovenia or Hungary or somewhere without any border checks. So there are so many issues that are involved in these things. It's not just about, oh, we are left out. Zimbabwe is not left out, but you want these pilot schemes to prove whether it works. The other leadership that you might realize is there were challenges in the diplomatic relations between Zimbabwe and Zambia, especially around the time Zimbabwe was having elections. But there was a lot of work to try and correct that, to the extent that the Zambian candidate for the presidency of the Africa Development Bank was sponsored and campaigned for by Zimbabwe. And also, when you look at the Africa Union chairmanship, the commission, there was a SADC leadership role. Why? To try and protect the interests of SADC in whoever becomes the chairperson of the Africa Union Commission. So there are so many of these huge diplomatic things that were being done. Where I say it was a missed opportunity, it was a missed opportunity because when the president said, Lapo Khona uzibona chairman we-SADC, I think that was either lost in translation or people like Mahomva didn't explain what that was supposed to mean to Zimbabwe. The first point I would start Maku, is to say to you, this program should have been done, or would have been best done, you saying, we have the monitoring media organization in South Africa, in Zambia, in Botswana, in Namibia, in Madagascar, in Seychelles or Comoros, wherever, all the member states, Mauritius, sorry, all the member states would have been giving you feedback from their point of view, what the Zimbabwean chairmanship has been as a reflection for them. Because the impact of the chairmanship of Zimbabwe is felt differently in different countries, but you are talking about the entire SADC. So that way, you would have known whether the Mozambicans appreciate the intervention of Zimbabwe in the challenges that they had, and when people were dying and buildings being burnt down and statues of their war heroes being kicked, whether they appreciate that or they don't. Zambians would have been telling you whether they appreciate the role that Zimbabwe played in the issues that they had or not. Mauritius would have been telling you how Zimbabwe led during their own elections and the challenges that they faced. Madagascar would have been telling you the same. And the economic, the social, and everything else, you would have been getting that flavor. So the first missed opportunity was misreading what that statement meant. What that statement meant was every other sector, media to begin with, would have been organizing the leadership across the SADC. There should have been a SADC channel that is attached to the chairmanship. We should have been having Nonhlanhla and other people being attached to the presidency and the foreign ministry every time there is SADC work to be done. So you guys should have been in Madagascar now. You should have been doing this program from Madagascar, telling us what's happening and how the Zimbabwe chairmanship is now being handed over and what it would have meant. So everything that would have been, when VP was going to Zambia, when people were going to Mozambique, when people were going to Mauritius, you would have been embedded to that process. Because what that means is, as an institution, as media, you have people that are for the whole year attached to let Zimbabweans know what's going on and to let SADC know what's going on. And not just that, we should have been like the mayor of Bulawayo, bless him, he loves cricket. We should have been having a SADC cricket tournament, the same as the World Cup or the European Cup or whatever. It would have been held in Bulawayo. What that would have meant is when Namibians and South Africans and everybody comes to Bulawayo, the economy will grow.
I hope you're lending Tampanga.
Yeah. I'm lending with that. So, and the same thing. And I want to correct something that one of my elder brothers said about the SADC money that was used for infrastructure ahead of SADC. There's no extra money that was used beyond money that was already planned. So the money that was used for those roads was money that was already earmarked for the Beitbridge Harare Chirundu road. So there's no extra money that went in beyond the fact that that's money that was always going to be used for that project anyway. So that Mount Hampton Road is the same money that was always going to be used for the Chirundu Road in any event. But it was also a missed opportunity because Victoria Falls could have bid to host that summit, and everything that all these roads that we're talking about in Victoria Falls would have had priority then. Bulawayo could have decided to put a bid to host the SADC, and Bulawayo would have been the one that is given that priority. Nkai would have, there's nothing that stops Nkai from making that bid, and those roads would have been done as well. Just like Mapisa made a bid for something else, and their roads are going to be done. So that's just how it works. It's a missed opportunity for me because there are so many things that we could have done from media, from industry, from sports, from arts, from culture. We could have been showing that leadership by bringing everyone together in Zim and under that statement that we are all chairs or chairmen of SADC. But I also think that there's so much success, but the media hasn't had an opportunity because we didn't have embedded media. We didn't know probably the things that were going on. Ngiyabonga.
Is Nonhlanhla speaking? Nonhlanhla, are you there?
Well, thank you so much, Tamsangwa, for your submissions. They reflecting on, Zimbabwe SADC Chairmanship. He says for him, it was mostly, it was a success and there were missed opportunities as well. What do you think, guys, this morning? And he also spoke about how we should be thinking about lessons so that when the next, when we are chairman next time, we then take it from there. Taxi driver, I hope you are also going to speak on lessons, maybe looking forward and as the chairmanship is passed on, as we wait for our other 10, what are the lessons and what should we be preparing for?
Nonhlanhla, I'm sorry, I'm going to disappoint you here. How are you? I'm not going to speak about lessons. I'm going to debunk a few narratives that were being peddled here. A flagrant disregard of statistics. I mean, I'm fast discovering that it is not a Zimbabwean problem of not reading. It is actually a SADC problem. Reports are there, right? The statistics
Tamsanga, can
are
you hear
recorded.
taxi driver?
Yes, I'm hearing him. And he is saying, Uguti, rather than lessons, he just wants to correct a number of issues that have been raised with regards to statistics.
Okay, I'll proceed.
Well, you can go ahead, taxi driver, and then Attendai will wrap up the show for us.
All right, then, thank you. I want to debunk specifically Korisi and Tendai. They come here and say nothing has happened from an economic point of view. That actually is false. It's a flagrant disregard of what has been happening in our region, right? We all know that the G20 presidency is within South Africa at this stage, so the focus is on SADC and South Africa and countries within that region. I've been privileged to be a co-author of an infrastructure financing model paper that has been presented to the G20, right? So I interacted with the numbers in Africa intimately. So I understand what has been obtaining in the Southern Africa, because that was my key focus. I wanted to know what is happening within Southern Africa. So I implore my brothers to go and interact with the World Bank poverty inequality platform. It will give you these numbers. They're very fresh. We see that in 1990, right, the number of people who were living in extreme poverty was 38%, right? It is the lowest it has been, right? It fell by a percentage point when the president of Zimbabwe took on the SADC chairmanship. Although Zimbabwe is not part of the ones that saw significant movement in the number of people living in with less than $2.15 per day, right? Now people within that region, on average, are living at $4 per day, which is an improvement. It is an improvement. It's not what I want to see, but it is an improvement. It's not $2.15. And significant numbers have been witnessed in Madagascar, Mozambique, Malawi, Zambia, right? Those are the ones that saw a significant movement down, right? We move, right? Under the chairmanship of President Mnangagwa, he has called for internal consumption, right? Government spending internally, right? Go and look at the annual government consumption spending by African Union. You see the numbers are there. They speak for themselves, right? You don't need to tell us here narratives, right? There was a growth in terms of exports, right, from Africa, from Southern Africa particularly, right, going elsewhere, improving our balance of trade. They are there. The number is there, right, by African Union, right? They publish that numbers through the Africa Development Bank. We have seen a growth in infrastructure development across the region, right? That is demonstrated by the economic growth report by the World Bank, because they are the frontier in terms of funding of these infrastructure projects. So don't come here and call and peddle lies when we're seeing growth. It may not be the growth that we want, but it is there. It is reported. Go and acquaint yourself with facts. Go and see the economic complexity ranking of that region. You can even narrow it down to the region and see the growth within our region. It's there. Again, the report here is Economic Observatory of Economic Complexity, right? 2024, right? For our region, you can narrow it down. Go and acquaint yourself with data. It's there. The information is there. There's academic, there's reports that are published by funders that you can even interact with. So next time when you debunk these things, please bring numbers so that we know that when the SADC chairmanship was adopted by Zimbabwe, poverty, people who were living under $2.15 were this amount or this percentage. It hasn't improved, it has declined. Rather than just hyperventilating and giving us taglines that don't mean anything, give us the numbers, give us the reports. We can go and interact with those numbers and those reports. If you want these reports, I can give you. You can narrow them. You can try and look at them and see what you want. If you look at GDP for Tanzania, that was saying improved, right? It is now per person, an individual. If you look at an average, they're earning 3,214 per month. This is in dollars, right? I know you like Western numbers. This is in dollars. That's the average earning per Tanzanian in Tanzania, right? If you look at what is owing to that growth, they're exporting tourism. People are coming into Tanzania, they're enjoying the experience. Look at the numbers of tourists that visited Tanzania. They like Zanzibar. Maybe it's owing to Chaba and Dudukwe. People are flocking. We have seen more recently Louis Vuitton following Chaba and Dudukwe. So there's a lot happening in our country. It's tourism being exported. I'm sure a lot of you have interacted with those people. So there's a lot happening in our country. So please don't just come here and just push narrative or express your emotional anger. Give us the numbers. Many thanks.
Yeah, Nonhlanhla, who taxi driver is done. He's basically given a pushback on the numbers, citing that he's part of the people that are compiling the data and reports for G20 under the chairmanship of South Africa, and mentioning the difference between the figures and in the official reports in terms of poverty, alleviation, the indicators, and the infrastructure development, and all those factors. And he's challenging those that were saying nothing has changed to compare that to statistics that are official and coming from the World Bank, but he is done. Thanks.
No, but that guy is not honest, because if we can go and look at the bread and butter issues, if we check the number of unemployment people in Zimbabwe, the number of unemployment people in South Africa, those are the things that we should be talking about. Don't tell us about poverty and that you don't know what finds it. For example, in South Africa, we have more social grant beneficiaries than taxpayers.
Taxi driver in Tanzania for the summary as well. Quite interesting, submissions this morning as people were giving their reflections on Zimbabwe's SADC chairmanship from their point of view as Zimbabweans in and outside Zimbabwe. And also we had a submission here from Kurisi, who is a South African, but who also comes to Zimbabwe once in a while. So we'll wrap up the show with our guest here at Tendai Mbofana. Our other guest was Richard Mahomva, but he's gone to another meeting. We stretched, first we had connectivity problems, and then we have stretched our discussion to beyond our time. So he had to go to another engagement, which he had notified me about actually yesterday. So Tendai, what are your closing remarks as well as lessons going forward?
Yes, thank you so much. The lessons that we can learn is that, first and foremost, we need to desist from imagined success. As long as we fool ourselves into thinking that something was a success, then we have not learned anything, and we are bound to repeat the same mistakes. Let's look at even the statistics that have been peddled by the last speaker. Can he honestly link it? Because the key here is to link it to Zimbabwe's chairmanship of SADC. Yes, he can say there was economic growth in this country, but we need to link it and say this was the result of Zimbabwe's chairmanship of SADC in this way, and in this way. That is why we saw the economic growth in this country. In fact, I can turn the tables on the speaker and say, did you know that in the past year, the economies of Zambia and the DRC declined? They deteriorated. Are we then to say this should be blamed on Zimbabwe's chairmanship of SADC? Because if you are going to give Zimbabwe's chairman of SADC the credit for economic growth in specific countries, we can as well blame Zimbabwe's chairmanship of SADC for the decline in Zambia and the DRC. But that would be disingenuous. And unless if we can prove a direct link with Zimbabwe's chairmanship of SADC and these economic statistics that we are peddling. The same goes for all this claim of quiet diplomacy and saying that we saw the Vice President Chiwenga in Zambia recently, and this was because he was trying to mediate this dispute between the Zambian president and the Zambian government and the family of the late President Lungu. We know what quiet diplomacy is. He even made reference to what we saw in Zimbabwe during the Mugabe era with the former President Thabo Mbeki. It was visible. It might not have been megaphone diplomacy where you are criticizing this part and condemning this part and so, but we saw the movement. Mbeki was here. Yes, the Zulus and others were here. We could see the action. We could see the movement. We did it. It was not a megaphone, but we could see it. What could we see? Let's say with the conflict in Mozambique last year, the post-electoral violence. What movement were we seeing from the SADC chair to that country, in which we could say, okay, as much as we don't know what is being said and what is happening, but they are trying to mediate. I made reference to the extraordinary SADC meetings that were called for by the SADC chair after the elections in Mozambique. We read the communique. Only a few sentences were devoted to the crisis in Mozambique. The rest was on the DRC. So that alone shows that the Mozambique crisis was not top priority. People were dying. You know, the Maputo was on fire, but SADC was not interested. It was just looking aside. So let's not, imagine successes where there are really no successes to talk about, because we will not learn anything. And we can also talk about and say, okay, let's go to these countries, to Madagascar and others, and try to hear from the people how this Zimbabwe SADC chairmanship benefited them. We read the media. We don't need to go to Madagascar or to Zambia or Malawi to find out what the people think about Zimbabwe SADC chairmanship. Just go through their media. They're saying nothing. Absolutely nothing. Ask anyone in Mozambique or Zambia who even the current SADC chair is. They might not even know. So, quite honestly, these things, we need to be honest with each other and not pat ourselves on the back for nothing. What we needed to see with the SADC chairmanship of any country, including Zimbabwe, is to promote the values, actively promote the values of SADC. Whether this is to do with the economy, to do with democracy, with free and fair elections, credible elections, or human rights. These are things that are core to SADC. These are things that were core to SADC even at its formation. Did we see Zimbabwe pushing for these ideals? Did we see Zimbabwe speaking loudly about these ideals? No, not at all. Zimbabwe was an absent leader. We mentioned Mozambique. We mentioned several other hotspots, DRC and others. Yes, we could have seen DRC. Yeah, I can admit that there was a bit of action with that meeting between SADC and the East African community. But Mozambique and others, where was Zimbabwe? Where did we even ever hear Zimbabwe actually pushing for democracy in Lesotho, in Eswatini? So we need to see a SADC chairmanship. I hope this will be the case with Madagascar, where you come out openly as a leader and say, no, these are the values we prescribe to a SADC, and we demand and we compel every member state to adhere to them. Anything less will be a violation of SADC's own principles and guidelines on various issues. So thank you so much for this platform that you have given us, Nonhlanhla. I really appreciate it, and thank you to all the guests who have come, and I hope we can have more of these interactions in the future. Thank you so much.
It's really his propaganda, not just.
Well, thank you so much, Tendai, and to all our speakers. We also appreciate Richard's contributions and also him sparing his time to speak to us as we reflect on Zimbabwe's SADC chairmanship. So thank you so much, Tendai. Thank you so much, Richard. Also, thank you to all our speakers this morning for sharing with us your reflections on Zimbabwe's SADC chairmanship, what you saw as the gains, what you saw as